timeline therapy is interesting because it allows us to go back on the timeline and actually reset the unconscious program. And I know this is going to sound kind of weird, but let's say you had a traumatic experience in life at 3 years old. You don't remember it, but you can feel the emotions from it.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Destination Happiness. Today I'm joined by Raechelle Minney, who walked away from a thriving career at a Fortune 500 company to create a life on her own terms, one filled with purpose, adventure, and true fulfillment. Raechelle's journey has taken her across the globe, and now she dedicates herself to helping others find abundance in time, money, and inner peace. In this episode, Raechelle shares her story of transformation, the powerful tools she uses, and her advice for designing a life filled with freedom and purpose. Get ready to be inspired to make your own bold changes. Raechelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and chat and just open up what's available.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm very excited to have you. So, Raechelle, you kind of had what people may have described as a perfect life before. You had a thriving career at a Fortune 500 company, an admired relationship, and a lifestyle of travel. How did you feel within this life that to others may have seemed ideal?
I think what's interesting is we create our life as we, live it. And it's kind of like a try and test it out, but we don't always look at it that way. And so what I've learned over the years is it's an experiment, and the experiment kind of failed first time around. Not that I wanted it to, but I felt like the moment I remember distinctly, I had just built my first home with my partner at the time. And I was standing in this glorious, beautiful new bathroom with jetted tub, all the things. And I thought I was supposed to feel really happy. That was my expectation. And I didn't. I felt very empty and very sad. And I was like, this is weird. I feel like I should feel better about where I'm at here. And I just didn't. And I felt like I had checked a lot of boxes. I had the charismatic partner. I had the amazing job. He had a great job. We had the house, the things, and it was not what I wanted. And so that quickly, within 3 months of thinking that, unraveled and fell apart. So grateful it did, because I've experienced so much more since then.
Yeah. I kind of had a similar experience to you, actually. I was with my ex, had a good job. We were just about to buy a house, but COVID hit, so we couldn't. So I think some time passed and we ended up just renting a place. And I got there and it was the perfect house. I was like, I had this long-term relationship, had a great job, but something just wasn't right. And there's this list and you've got to tick off all the boxes, and supposedly once you've ticked off everything, then that's meant to bring you happiness, but it just doesn't. And because it doesn't, it actually makes you feel worse, because all the things that you've been aspiring for, you finally got them. And then you realize that actually this isn't what life's about.
No, not even
So
close.
we've had kind of similar experience there, yeah. Was there a specific turning point that made you realize that you needed to redefine what success was or happiness meant for you?
I think there are multiple points. That one I just described. There was another one where when I did leave my big fancy job, I was branching out on my own, starting to coach women on money mindset and things that I was really passionate about. And I kept getting met with resistance in my job through compliance, because I worked in a finance company. It was very heavily regulated, and we worked on investments. We didn't talk about money mindset. So in my mind, there are two separate buckets, right? I'm not sitting here telling people how to invest. I'm teaching women how to make more money and release the limitations in their mind, all of that. But I just kept getting met with all this resistance at work. And I finally had to say, okay, I have to quit, because this isn't working together anymore. And so once I finally did, that's when my online business really started to thrive. And then I was able to have that location freedom of traveling, and everything else started to open up after that.
Perfect. So what you're saying is your heart wasn't really in it anymore when it came to your work. Perhaps it would have been at one point, or maybe you thought that was what you were meant to do. But the further down the work path you went, the further up the career ladder you went, you were like, It's not for me.
Yeah, it was like I was in that middle management range where it's like I could see the path forward. I could see how becoming, because at that point I could have become like a VP or something within that small company. In a bigger company, I was like, I know it's the same thing over and over again. So I didn't feel like that was worth pursuing. It's like I want to feel like I'm making a difference in people's lives and having an influence.
Yeah, I understand. I completely get you. So when you did eventually quit your job to pursue things yourself, how did you feel then? And how did you begin to discover what you truly wanted? Tell me how you felt in that moment.
Yeah, I remember I felt nervous and excited, a lot of fear when I quit because I kind of had one day to think about it before I was in this meeting with compliance and all the people. And it was kind of like another session of me being reprimanded for what I was doing. I was like, I'm not taking this anymore. I'm quitting. And my partner at the time was so thrilled for me because he had done something similar, quit his job, and now we could like be in it together. And he brought me after that meeting like candy and flowers and all the things. So it was like this celebration. I was super nerve-wracked. I just was like, now what? And it became this ever-evolving process of now I could actually go travel when I wanted to. I wasn't beholden to a company. And so, yeah, in that moment, I was really nervous, but everything after that really flowed.
So it was definitely the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So I think your travel is kind of like, it's played quite a huge role in terms of shifting your mindset. How did these experiences impact your views on abundance, time, and adventure?
So it's interesting travel life because I think everyone wants to do it, but not very many people take the leap. And then those of us that do take the leap, there's kind of two camps. There's travel and then go live somewhere outside of your home country. And then there's like travel and continue to travel and travel and travel. And so my partner and I at the time were in that more second bucket of travel, which people call slow travel. And in my mind, I'm like, this is not freaking slow. This is still fast because when you are living your life traveling, it's different than going on vacation. When you're just traveling to go somewhere and visit, you're not trying to live your life, meaning go to the grocery store, find a gym that you like find people that you like redefining your life every single time when you move, and maybe that move is for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months. Like it's crazy on the nervous system, crazy for trying to plan anything. And so for me, that didn't go well in that sense. For my partner at the time, he loved it. He really thrived in that. We are no longer together. He still thrives in that. He loves it. And I'm happy for him, but I just couldn't keep going at that speed because it didn't feel slow. So I think to answer like the original question, it's really defining the values that you have for your life.
Yeah.
And that is what sets the stage and the foundation for building upon those values in terms of your actions. And so if I value my environment and the people I'm around and the place that I'm in, and I want to have more controls over that, probably don't want to fast travel or slow travel. Probably want to have a home base and then travel from that place. And that's what I've established at this point. But even beyond that, it's like when it comes to your time freedoms, do you want to spend a bunch of time logistically traveling? I don't really want to. So, it's like being more strategic, more intentional with the time that I do spend in traveling.
It's really exhausting as well. And I've been doing like the slow travel kind of thing for the past, well, it'll be 3 years almost. And when I initially left the UK, I only had 2 nights accommodation booked. And in my mind, I was like, right, I'm moving abroad. And I had no idea what to expect. I was just kind of like, see where the wind takes me. Yeah. So I ended up living in Asia for 2 months. And I had my base there. And then I was just like traveling around Bali.
Yes. Yeah, same.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I loved it, but I think because I was just like, I wasn't working, so it didn't feel like a place that I could stay there long term. It felt like I was living there because like I had my place and stuff, and like I had like some friends that I had made who were expats living there. I didn't feel like I was backpacking. But on the other hand, I wasn't working either, so it was kind of like an in-between thing. I decided that I didn't want to stay there anymore. So then I moved to Australia I was living in Brisbane for a while and I was there for 7 months, but all this moving around, it just gets absolutely exhausting mentally because not only like is the physical side, like the logistic thing, you've got to physically take your stuff. You've got to, like you say, find a gym, make friends, figure out the area, find a job if you're not like working remotely. And it does get incredibly exhausting. Do you think the same?
Yeah, I think it's exhausting and overwhelming to think about doing that indefinitely, right? Because it's not that you're doing this once, it's that you're doing this once for 4 weeks and then you know you're going to have to do it all over again.
Yeah.
And then potentially again and again and again. And that's what I feel like feels big and exhausting.
So do you find more value then in having a base and then traveling from that base and doing like travels to and from there? Or do you still do more like the traveling without kind of like an end goal and see where you end up? Which one do you do?
It's interesting because as my life has evolved again,
So my current partner now, he is Mexican. And so it's a different way of doing it. I think if I was by myself, I would probably, which I've still kind of done, but it's all been within Mexico. So I've only been on this part of the journey for 1.5 years, whereas I was slow traveling for 2 years. So I spent 1 year in Tulum and then I was like, okay, this ain't it. So now I moved to the other side of Mexico. So I'm still year by year now moving, right? Is kind of the theme. But I had to choose somewhere within Mexico because that was way easier for him because we don't have like the same freedoms as in terms of like if we were to travel together, it would be very difficult because his visa is going to look different than my visa. Like, I don't know how people do it with 2 different types of visas. Like, that sounds like a nightmare. So I'm thinking it's going to be way easier for us to create a home base here. And now that I feel more content in this area, I'm like, okay, let's actually grow roots here from a home base and then start to travel because he enjoys travel too. And we can travel 6 times a year because that's still every 2 months. And so like that fulfills that desire to like get out of here and like go do something and go travel. But I don't need it to be me living in another environment.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of already are. You're not from Mexico, are you?
Right.
You're living as an expat. You're still able to travel. You're living abundantly.
Yeah, exactly. Like it feels very freeing to be doing it however I want to.
Am I right in saying that you've lived in 9 countries?
I've lived in 13 countries at this point.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So a lot. Where have they been and what's been your favorite country to live in?
I can never remember all of them all at once, but I'll give you kind of the basics. For some reason, some of them always like I forget. But where I've lived that have been the most prominent, I did live in Bali for 4 months, which was fantastic. I loved it. I lived in Ubud and Canggu. I forget. And then I lived in Bangkok, Thailand for 3 months. I lived in Vietnam, in Da Nang, Vietnam for about 2 months. I lived in Montenegro, which is a very tiny country in Europe, south of Croatia. That was one of my favorites. And I lived in Colombia. Don't recommend that. It was extremely dangerous.
I didn't like Colombia, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I did say in one of my previous episodes, Colombia was like it's portrayed in the media.
Right. Yep, basically. Mm-hmm. Yep. You want to go somewhere that feels like that high risk? Yep, that's it. You can go there. Mexico, obviously. I think out of all of them, my favorites have been Bali, Montenegro. I really enjoyed Greece as well. But yeah, I liked Montenegro better. And then Mexico has just felt like a second home for sure.
So when you've been traveling in all these places and living in these places too, in terms of work then, I'm probably people are a lot very curious in terms of like how you fund your travels while, how you fund yourself abroad while you're living in all these places. Because I'm sure when you were living in Bangkok for all that time, you didn't get a job working in Bangkok. And plus there's visa restrictions, so you can't do that anyway. I'm curious then as to how you've managed to fund yourself doing all of this.
Yeah. There's kind of three different sources that have
Transpired along the way. So I do consulting work. So I work consulting for sales for various companies. So that pays the bills.
I have my own business, which has kind of evolved into more of a passive income. I have a private podcast that creates revenue. And then I day trade. And day trading was how I primarily made income when I was living in Asia.
Day trading. Okay. So if people want to start looking into their own day trading, what advice would you give on where to begin?
Yeah, I think, and this is just kind of like me, my financial advisor hat going on. It's really asking yourself the intention behind it. You know, is the income to produce wealth or is it to produce like cash flow for your day-to-day life? And when you start day trading for cash flow, like there's a whole different objective. Whereas most people think of investing as to build wealth for retirement or someday in the future. And so you just have a different approach to how you invest. What I ended up doing is I didn't really want to learn day trading from like a Wall Street type of guy, you know, like real slick. I wanted to learn from someone who really cared. And so Terry Agioma, we can link her in the show notes, but she is who I learned from. She has a program for day trading where she teaches you how to pattern day trade. It's really simple. The farthest part about day trading is actually managing emotions, managing fear, managing greed. So she talks and teaches all about that. So I did her program before I started traveling. And then as I was traveling, I would day trade.
Amazing. And did you have any experience with day trading before you learned from Terry?
A little bit. When I was in the finance industry, we were taught like the basics because our licenses required it. Like if I was to manage people's money and do investment banking, then that would be something I would have gotten into. I never did, but it was part of our training essentially. So the problem with that is that in the industry, we're regulated so that we can't day trade, which is kind of silly. It's like we have these skills, but we can't use them. So,
So you're
Well,
required to learn about it, but you're
right,
not allowed to use it.
right. Like
So I guess
I
when
would
you
be
went
allowed to use it
into
if for clients, but not for myself.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. But I guess
Mhm.
now, you've got that knowledge yourself. You're not working for anyone anymore.
Right.
So you've kind of used
I
that
can
to
use
your
it.
own advantage.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's a
Yeah.
great path to take if
Hmm.
you want to, yeah, provide. I think the struggle for most people in terms of traveling, the number one question I get asked is how do you fund it? I'm sure maybe the same is with you.
yeah.
The normal thing to do is probably like to save up for a bunch of time, save up like, I don't know, however much money you can, and then go on a trip. But then after that trip, you're kind of left in the same position as you was before. It's not something that continue and take you traveling further. It's kind of like once your money runs out, then that's it. You've kind of got to go back to square one, wishing you were still traveling, but without the funds to do so.
Yeah. No, I've always worked while traveled. So my mindset around that is I'm going to work as I go through this. I'm not going to stop working at any point.
Yeah. And shift away from that mindset of holiday, vacation.
Yeah.
It's not. It's like lifestyle design.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so when I was doing some research on you, Raechelle, I came across human design and gene keys. And when I read that, I was like, what on earth does that mean? So I did some research, but I'd like to hear it from you. Can you tell us a bit more about what these are?
Yeah. So human design is really fun. Think about it like a personality test, right? It actually takes into account 7 different genres of astrology, personality testing, and different elements to create your what's called human design. So my design is a manifesting generator. My lines are to be an investigative opportunist. So all that means is it gives me a framework for how I can really amplify who I am in life. And that's how I use it as kind of like this framework. So in thinking through like, okay, if I'm really good at investigating and finding opportunities, like, can I lean into that more? So it's kind of like Strengths Finder is a very corporate
Personality test. So Strengths Finder would be like, okay, you have your 5 strengths and you lean into that.
So it's kind of very similar, but it's got a more, I would say, esoteric contemplative approach to how you can wield and use it. And the same is true of Gene Keys. I would say Gene Keys is even more contemplative because it doesn't necessarily give you answers. It's giving you new lines and new threads of how to think about life. And so when you can put those keys together in Gene Keys for yourself, you now have an abundance lineage, you now have a purpose lineage, you now have a relationship lineage, meaning that your way of being in relationships with money, with purpose, all have kind of a tie into each other. And so it's just a really cool, unique way to think about how you operate in life and can use those tools to really amplify what you're doing already.
I see. So is it kind of like it takes everything you know about yourself, you kind of like, I guess, plug in the information or however, and then it's like, right, so I've identified this. This is how you can live your life more purposely. You say you have interests in X, Y, and Z things. So I'm reading a book at the moment. Have you read Kagi?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a Japanese book. Well, it talks about Japanese philosophies, and it's got like this Venn diagram on it. It's like things that you can make money from, things that you're good at, things that fulfill you. And it's kind of like the reason behind it is like, so you can actually find your true purpose in life and sort of like the reason why you wake up out of bed in the morning. Is it similar to that?
Yeah, very similar. So let me use a specific example. So like in my human design, there's a sun sign, which is 70% of my personality, and it's a conscious part of me. My conscious sun sign is gate 42, which is growth and increase. So if majority of my personality focuses on growth and increase, like that makes total sense just in how I live my life. I'm talking about abundance. I'm talking about evolving constantly, right? Like I love and thrive in talking about those types of things.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm already aligned with that, but how do I really amplify that and validate that in my life's work, right? And tie in purpose to that. So a lot of times it's very validating when you hear things like that for yourself. It's like, oh, yeah, I do feel that that's very true for me.
Does it feel like when you read your zodiac or your horoscope and then you kind of pick things out, you're like, oh, that resonates with me. So you kind of just take it and run with it. Is it like a similar thing?
Yeah, it's a little bit more complex in terms of frameworks, but yeah, very similar.
So if I wanted to go and find my human design and others, where could they start?
Yeah, I think if you just Google human design, there's 2 different websites that are free that pop up that you can fill in certain information and get your human design. I also did a human design reading with who is now one of my friends, Maria Henny. I don't think she does readings anymore, but she'll give you tools for it. And really, you can find a lot of human design experts online too. Same thing with Gene Keys. You can Google Gene Keys, look it up. They have a free, on their website directly, they have a free class to go through, and it talks through how to understand your purpose, Gene Keys, and the different elements. So it's really fun to understand.
I'm going to go straight on that after this. I'm going to find my own human design and Gene Keys because I think it's really interesting. And recently I've been feeling a bit like I'm back in England at the moment. I'm kind of having a pit stop, like we were saying earlier about it's very exhausting, constantly traveling, slow traveling or fast, whatever. Like it does get mentally tiring. So I'm having a break in England at the moment, back at home with my family. But I've been here for a while now and I kind of was just feeling maybe a few weeks ago, like, what is my purpose? I kind of had that whole existential crisis all over again. So I started reading this book and it's made me feel a lot better. Just consciously like exploring what actually is it that I like to do? What is it that I want to achieve in life? So I think it's definitely very valuable for people to look at that. So I'm definitely going to have a look straight after the call.
I'll look at that. The other thing that, and I don't think this is in my profile, so you wouldn't have read it, but I did I don't know if you'd call it a reading or like a conversation with a guy. His website is called Inner Shift. And Inner Shift is basically teaching you your inborn personality, which is interesting because it's not what your perceived personality is, like what you think about yourself. It's actually what is based on forensics. So he has you take a picture of your face and he has you walk and then walk back. And from your way of walking and how your facial expressions are set up, he does a forensic reading on you and tells you your inborn personality. And it is wild, like absolutely insane.
Did you think it was accurate? Because I wouldn't even know.
Yeah, I did. But I think I thought it was accurate because my personality is self-actualized. And so as he was explaining it to me, it put it into a new perspective of why I feel the way I feel and why it's different than how I experience other people. He put it into perspective as far as like how other people perceive me. And then he put it in perspective of how I relate to business and to life and the things that I do. And he went on and on and on about me for an hour. And like, I didn't even say hardly 2 words. And he just went, and then you do this, and then this, and then. So it was like, how did he know all of that just from my face and me walking? Like it was.
And you'd never met this person before.
No.
So I've never done a psychic reading, but it felt kind of like a psychic reading without it being too wooey.
Imagine this guy just like out and about, like in the cities, looking at everyone,
Right.
watching them when they cross the road, and he's like,
Right.
I know who
Yes,
you are
I know
because
how
you
you
walk in a
operate."
certain way. Everyone is being
Wild.
perceived. I'll have to include a link down below in the show notes for people to go and check that out. But yeah, no, that's really interesting stuff. I'm definitely super keen to get more engrossed in that research. Okay, so I want to talk about how a lot of people have fixed ideas on wealth and money. What do you think are some common societal narratives about money that you think hold people back?
Yeah, there's a lot.
I think a big one is it's just an I can't statement, right? So I'll use an example. I'm in a small group of women and we're in a container together, and something I've realized about myself recently is I want to become a billionaire. Like that is a desire I have deep down. And for a year, I've had this thought. It's not like I sought it out. It's like it was inserted into me, right? Like it was downloaded from the universe. Like I have this now desire to become a billionaire. It's like the logical brain is like, okay, that's not real. And then my very expanded side of me is like, it's totally possible, and like finding out ways to make it possible. But when I say something like that out loud to especially other women, the responses I get are so fascinating. So I'm honestly just saying it now just to see what kind of response I get from people.
Yeah.
Because in this small group I'm in, everyone's super honest, like super reflective, and can understand like how they are perceiving something, right? So we talk through it. But one woman, like, she was like, wow, when you said that, it was very triggering to me in my body. Like I could feel in my body how I was very much resistant to that idea for you and for me.
It's like interesting.
So like we unpacked it a little bit, and she's like, yeah, my first thought was, you can't do that. And then my second thought was like, okay, why can't she do that? And it's like, no, I'm reflecting back to you what I feel about myself, which is I could never do that, right? So it's like this limitation. Obviously, that's like a big example of like a lot of people are going to think they can't do that. But there are smaller moments in life where we do the same thing and limit ourselves or try to limit others, especially when it comes to wealth and money, because of our perception around it. And so if we want to operate from a place of limitlessness, we need to be in awareness that that's even happening. Because if you don't even know it's happening, you're going to continue to cycle in that pattern of limits.
Just normalize it. So just tell yourself like these things are possible. And I guess it's like, it comes down to as well, who you surround yourself with, the things that you consume. That's really interesting. And I guess it is kind of a reflection of themselves, and not only with money, but just like everyday things. Like, you know, as women,
Even
we always find ourselves comparing to others. But say, for example, you are in a social setting and someone maybe made like a nasty comment to you and they don't know you. That's not a reflection on who you are. Oh, this person said that I'm ugly, which means I'm ugly. No, that's a reflection of themselves. So it doesn't just come down to that. It does go further as well.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me.
It's fascinating to see the pattern. It's fascinating to hear where we all limit ourselves, right? Like we all limit ourselves in some capacity, but where we limit ourselves. And that's what I like to teach in my programs, is like to become aware of where we limit ourselves, because then once you're aware, you can unravel it and you can redefine it.
I was in Bolivia this year. So I was staying in a hostel, as you do. And the people that I met were saying, oh, we're going to climb this mountain tomorrow, Mount Juana Potosi. Do you want to come? And I was like, oh, yeah, like I'm always up for a challenge. I've never really like hiked or climbed mountains before, but I looked online and it said it was beginner friendly. So of course I was up for it. But when I got there, I realized that the group of people I was with were like so fit, ultra marathon runners. Some of them lived in the Alps and things like this. And I was just like so unprepared for it all. I hadn't done any training or anything like that. And I kind of felt like there's no way I'm going to make it. And when I read the statistics, and the guide has said to us, only 80% of people managed to summit this mountain. And there was like 10 of us in the group, and I was the weakling. So statistically, I shouldn't have made it. But I was so determined to make it to the top. So this was a 3-day hike.
Wow.
On the first day, we got there. We got to like base camp 1.
Mhm.
And we rented out all this equipment with the company. We had like crampons, we had our snow boots, we had like, you know, the big like snow jackets and salopettes. I think they're salopettes. I don't know. And we got there and we started like practicing walking in the snow. Bearing in mind, I didn't even know what a crampon was. And I kind of like quickly realized that I was the runt of the group.
Right.
So and so
I'm
day
surprised
2
you agreed to that. Like, I would probably agree to a day trip, but I don't know that I would agree to a 3-day trip.
a 3-day hike into the mountains. I'm always up for an adventure.
Good for you.
And so on day 2, we were hiking from base camp 1 to base camp 2, and everyone, they didn't intentionally leave without me. I was trying my hardest to keep up, but we just realized that I was just very slow. So I ended up just meeting them at base camp 2. So by the time it came to summit, I was just all in my head about it. I was telling myself, I was giving myself all these limitations, and I was saying like, couldn't even make it up here, like from base camp 1 to 2 and keep up with everyone. Like, how on earth are you going to summit? And I did express my worries to the guides. And they actually, so we were meant to be in groups of 2 going up together with one guide. But because I was so slow, they ended up putting the girl that I was with into another group of 3 so that I was by myself. Because if I didn't make it, then we'd all have to turn back. And they didn't want me to hold this other girl back. So all these things were going against me. And in my head, I was just trying to battle between, you're not going to make it. You couldn't even you hardly made it to here. How are you going to summit? But then on the other hand, I just had to tell myself, you can do this.
Yeah.
And there was actually a book in base camp 2 of all the other people that had been there, written things in there like, come on, you can do this, like
encouragement.
Words of encouragement. And I read through it. And honest to God, when I was doing that 7-hour summit from the second base camp, those words is what kept me going, just thinking about the words of encouragement, saying, you can do this, it's going to be tough, but you've got this. And honestly, maybe if I didn't read that book, I might not have made it to the top. But it is all about challenging your limit. And when I did make it to the top eventually, I thought I was going to cry, like everything was against me. But I redefined those limits and I made it.
Good. So good.
So yeah,
I love it.
that's just like a small scale. Well, maybe not that small scale, but
yeah, that's
you know,
so
it
big.
translates into other areas of life.
Yeah. It's the same with any type of fitness, and that's why I love fitness. That's the big challenge, well, and really little challenge every day, right, is to challenge yourself in that capacity, because that prepares you for other mental challenges in life, whether it's making money or day trading or building a business. Like, if you can do physical challenges, it translates really well to everything.
Yeah, definitely. So when I was researching, I also seen that you do some stuff on NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and also timeline therapy. So can you tell us a bit more about these tools and how they can help people reframe their beliefs about money and live more abundantly?
NLP is a really fun tool. So I'm certified as a practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming. And all that means is I can listen to someone and understand what is going on in their unconscious mind. And what that helps me do is start to unravel for them and point out where their limitations are that they are unaware of. And once I can do that for them, they are then able to recreate the pattern, because our brains operate based like a programmed computer. We have these patterns, we have these strategies that we've developed usually since childhood. So all of that can be changed and edited, but we have to first become aware that they even exist. And so that's like a huge tool that I use for myself and for others to just bring that awareness to the table. And then I give strategies for how to actually release the limits, reprogram our emotions, and then learn how to make new evidence for the new pattern that we want to create in our life. So that's kind of the easy 3-step process I use. Timeline therapy is interesting because it allows us to go back on the timeline and actually reset the unconscious program. And I know this is going to sound kind of weird, but let's say you had a traumatic experience in life at 3 years old. You don't remember it, but you can feel the emotions from it. We can go back to that timeline and before that timeline, and we can actually neutralize it. It's not an erase, it's a neutralizing process. And so when we do that with timeline therapy, it neutralizes like really intense emotions that people still feel in their body and haven't been reprogrammed. And so we can reprogram it.
What does this therapy look like? Is it sort of a hypnosis, or is it like verbal, bringing things to the
It's both. So it's like you're in a very relaxed state. I wouldn't call it hypnosis. I am trained in hypnotherapy, but that's probably the last resort that I would use.
I don't need to use it because the other two are more potent. And then we go back into your unconscious mind on the timeline, for example, in the scenario with your emotions, and then we can neutralize certain emotions. We can also do things like I felt someone stop nail biting, for example. Like she bit her nails all the time. She wanted to stop. And so there was a timeline of when that started and why and how she was like self-sabotaging. So there's a whole thing around it. And then we went back on the timeline, stopped it then, and now she's fine. She doesn't do it anymore. Like it's just a very immediate, like you have a habit, for me, mine was like eating these cookies that I really, really enjoyed. It was getting to be too much. And I was like, that'd be a fun one to like go back on the timeline and just neutralize. So when I was in my practitioner course, that's what I did with my partner that I was going through the course with at the time. And we neutralized it. And then from then on out, we redefined the program as those cookies equal licorice. I hate licorice. And so now like I have no desire for those cookies. So we can reprogram the brain around feeling, around habits, all sorts of things.
That sounds like magic.
Yeah, it does.
Why doesn't everyone do this? Like, like lots of people have bad habits. For example, smoking, binge eating, there's all sorts of things that we could go into. So why isn't it more widely used? Why don't people use this technique more often?
I've asked myself this a lot, and I think, and even going through that training and becoming a practitioner, even the people in the room who knew that they were signed up for this program and going through it, there was still 30% of them that didn't complete the program because it was too hard for them to believe that it was even possible to retrain their brain in that capacity. Like, it's crazy how much limitation our humanness puts on ourselves from societal conditioning, religious conditioning. Like there's so many conditions that are placed upon us that we really have to open ourselves up to break free from that and be willing to do that. And that's probably the biggest thing. If someone's not willing and wanting change, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I guess that's true. You can take the horse to the river, but you can't open its mouth kind of thing.
Totally.
I want to do this. Can I change about myself? Like a superpower.
Yeah. I feel like I have superpowers with it, for sure.
I feel like you've got superpowers.
Yeah, it's fun.
I think you do.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to now talk about making the leap and facing challenges. You talk about leaving a boring job to explore the world and work remotely. But many people feel trapped by what they should do in their careers. So what advice would you give to somebody struggling with these pressures and feeling hesitant to pursue their dreams?
I think it's to start small, actually. A lot of people think they need to like rip the Band-Aid off and quit everything and like go travel the world, right? Like it's very dramatic. And I don't think that's actually how it happens or happens sustainably. Let's put it that way. I think in order to create sustainable change where you are truly intentional about aligning your values with your actions and getting the outcome that you want, it is to understand what your values truly are. That's kind of a first step exercise. And then from those values, then starting to put into place different strategies, different habits that align to those values. So, for example, I've been working with a client. She's recently divorced and she's kind of like let herself go as far as like just her persona, her essence. And so we've been playing in these new ways of being. So, what I like to do with people is like have them play and let it be play. That's it, right? Like, how can we play while doing laundry? How could we play while exercising? How could it be play while working, right? And the moment I can introduce play to someone's way of being, now they start thinking of it differently. And now they stop making it about what should I do, but it's like, okay, I need to get this thing done because it's, thing on the checklist, but how could I do it in a way of playing through it? And now they're opening up to new possibilities, right? And so instead of me telling them to be more open or be more, think about the possibilities, it's like, how about we just play to start? And when they start doing that, they start feeling happier. They start feeling more fulfilled, more satisfied. And sometimes that's all it takes. Sometimes it's not
quit everything and go travel the world. Sometimes they just need more play in their life.
So why
And
do you
then
think that
it
is then?
evolves.
Do you think it's because maybe if you kind of turn things into a bit of a game, it removes the pressure of a certain outcome, and maybe it doesn't quite feel so real if it's kind of this game? Do you think that's the reason why that works so well?
I think it is exactly that first step of removing pressure, removing overwhelm, and removing burnout. And that's kind of the sequence, right? Like when I meet someone who's in pressure mode, it's like if they don't stop putting pressure on themselves, they will get to the overwhelm. If someone's in overwhelm, that means they've got so much pressure from all different angles that they're feeling overwhelmed. They're on their way to burnout. Someone who's already in burnout, it's like, we gotta like reset. That's when we have to push the pause. That's when we need to quit a lot of things and we actually need to kind of go in the opposite direction altogether. But if I can get with someone before they're in burnout and pressure or overwhelm, it's like, okay, we can make this a lot easier by really simple steps of play.
Okay, so I guess in a nutshell then, if somebody wants that first step towards pursuing their dreams, then your advice would be to just start small and
More play.
more play.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's good advice. Maybe I'll try and say that to other people as well. Think of it as a game.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then there's no pressure.
Start there. Yeah.
Okay. I think as well, another reason why people are so hesitant to pursue their dreams is there's a lot of reactions from friends and family who may have had different expectations. Starting with something new can be pretty daunting. So what advice would you give to somebody maybe who's feeling that pressure from certain friends or family to be somebody that maybe they don't feel aligns with who they actually are?
I recently had a really good friend go through this with her sister that she lived with, and her sister was very upset with her because she was transforming and changing her life and going in a different direction. And the whole family dynamic was ruined because of
her changes, right? At least that's the perception, right? And
yeah,
it's all perception, right? So my advice around this is when you can lean into what you can control, which is your emotional state, when you can have your come from be very genuine in your values, you can do so unapologetically, meaning my value is to be of influence to others to get them to release their limits, right? Like a value I hold is influence. And if that meant that I needed to go, change my job and work for a different company because I wanted to be in the transformation space and help people influence, but let's say my partner, which, to some extent this happened, my partner was very much opposed to this because that would mean I make less money or I wouldn't be around as much or all these things. As long as I'm in integrity with myself, I should go and pursue those values. If they are not in the same understanding, then it's about open communication. Then it's about communicating, this is what I value for myself in my life. It doesn't have to hurt or hinder you, but your response is your choice. And so it's really hard to do, but it's really allowing other people around you to make their choice in how they respond. And a lot of times they will respond poorly and not ideally. But when you can stay so true to respecting yourself, they will either have respect for you, and a lot of them do, or they will transform and have to, make their own decision about how their response occurs.
I see. And I guess maybe there's like, that could be seen as a negative. People might say you're being selfish, but I think selfish is not necessarily a bad thing. If you're being selfless, then yeah, you don't want to live your life as a people pleaser. You want to be pleasing yourself. So I guess, would you say that you have to let go of that sort of pressure of not being selfish?
Yeah, let's redefine selfish altogether, because the term selfish, really all we're saying is we're prioritizing self first, right? And so imagine a world where everyone did that. We might first think that that would just be chaos or like anarchy because everyone's out for themselves. But the reality is people's true values, people value family, people value connection, people value community, people value influence. Those are kind of the four big pillars that make up humanity. And if we actually leaned into those values and did so self-servingly, that would put so much more value into the world around us. But because we're so caught up in how we're affecting and our expectations of one another and people pleasing, we don't ever get to that full value system that we have internally. And so if we can all be a little bit more self-reflective and self-intuitive to what do I truly want and go after it, we would all appreciate each other much more and like, wow, that's amazing that you are doing that for yourself. What could I be doing for myself that also allows me to expand and to grow and to increase my capacity? And if everyone did that, then we're all in awe of each other.
Yeah. And I guess as well, if you're being more true to yourself rather than people pleasing, you're going to attract the people who genuinely resonate with those values that you share. 100%. So I guess in turn, you're going to have more valuable relationships. You're probably going to be happier and have a better quality of life if you live selfishly and if everyone did the same.
And it would require letting go of just like the mundane default relationships that you're in. Like I think of how many relationships I was in that were just because I lived near someone or I worked with someone or what, it was by proxy.
Convenience.
Yeah.
Maybe you would agree with me on this, but that's why when people go traveling, there's that whole cliche, it changes you. And I don't like being cliche, but I think that that's really like, it's true. And I think the reason why it changes you is because you're taken out of an environment where you're expected to be a certain person. People perceive you in a certain way. So that's kind of like, I guess, the way you act, sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But when you remove those certain people, you remove the routine, you remove the place, you're free to be whoever you want to be. And actually, that's when you start to tune into your authentic self.
Yes, 100%.
Definitely. True. I want to talk now a bit about building abundance and financial freedom, just as kind of like a little wrap up before we finish the episode, something to take away from the episode. So you encourage shifting from restrictive money habits to a mindset of building cash flow and financial freedom. So what would you say is the first steps in creating this shift?
I think a lot of it is with your mindset, right? It goes back to that intentionality of creating your value system first, aligning your actions to those values. For me, one of my values, there's a good book on this actually. So Value Factors is a good book to read on establishing your values. One of my value systems is money and abundance. And so that's really important for me to establish. So understand that those values also dictate how you operate authentically. And so if you're trying to establish financial freedom, really start to understand why. Why do you want that financial freedom? Why do you want the thing that you say that you want? So some people will say, I want it because I'll be able to do whatever I want with my time. Well, then don't you actually really want time freedom? Okay, yeah. So why would you want time freedom? Well, I want to be able to spend time with my family and my friends whenever I want to. Well, I want to be able to insert whatever they want, right? It's like, but why that? So then you're asking yourself a few layers deep, 4 or 5 layers deep of why, but why do you want it? And get to the root of why you want it before you go pursue it. Because now you can understand if it's a pursuit that's worth pursuing. Because if you only go 1 or 2 layers deep, it's like we said in the beginning, you check the list of have the house, have the guy, have the what job, whatever, but then you're not truly fulfilled. So until you fully ask yourself why you want it and will it actually be satisfying and fulfilling 5 layers deep, that's how you know for sure if it's worth pursuing.
You're going to save yourself a lot of time as well.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't take, it's not easy progressing up the career ladder. It's not easy moving to a new place.
Right.
So I think the why is fundamental. And I think more people should be asking themselves that question, but perhaps they're scared to ask themselves that question because they just don't really know what they truly want. It's not something that you can just decide, oh, I want to do this. You know, you have to really dig deep into your roots. What do you truly want from life?
Yeah. You have to quiet the noise too. I've noticed like a lot of people are so busy, so distracted with busyness that they haven't spent time asking themselves that question. And then if they do spend time in that, they actually don't have an answer because they haven't spent time in it. And it's scary to think about that, the fact that they haven't thought about it. So it's like you have to meet yourself
in that.
Yeah.
And that's difficult.
When did you start asking yourself that question?
Probably 5 years ago.
Maybe 6 years ago is when I had that kind of moment in my bathroom that I recall.
And then everything started kind of unraveling. But for sure, 5 years ago, I did a leadership program. And that was what they taught essentially is like, okay, we're going to go super deep in how you want to lead in your life and be a leader in the world around you. And
basically unravel everything that you think is your identity and establish, is that true or not?
Yeah, I get you. For me, I think that's definitely been something that I've started to think about this year. I mean, I moved countries 3 years ago, but the reason why I left, it wasn't because I didn't have a why. I just thought, you know, I'm going to get out there and see where it takes me. But I think it was actually maybe at the beginning of this year that I started to think, okay, so where do I want to live? Why do I want to go there? And I started asking myself all these questions, and they kind of all got a bit scary.
yeah, totally.
It is
And just
scary.
meet yourself in that scared place because that scared place is uncertainty, and that's not a bad thing. I think we create so much certainty around us that when we meet ourselves in uncertainty, it's extra scary because of all the certainty we have. And so that's actually where the juice is in life, is being in the uncertainty.
It is. And I think what's actually more scary is not asking yourself that question.
Yeah.
Because then maybe in like 10, 20 years time, you're going to look back and maybe you're going to ask yourself that question then, like, why do I do what is it that I actually want? And all that time's going to have passed, and you could have spent that time doing something, working towards fulfilling yourself, when in fact, maybe you've just been working at a career you don't like or a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, we're coming up to the end of the episode now, but I just wanted to touch on this moment of magic. It's a new section that I've started in season 2 of my podcast. I wanted to ask you, Raechelle, what is one incredible, unforgettable experience from your travels that has changed you or given you a new perspective on life? Is there one particular experience that you've had?
That's really difficult. There's so many good ones.
You can give me a few.
Okay, I'll give you a moment that I had. This was a retreat. It was a Joe Dispenza retreat. And for those that don't know, Joe Dispenza is a meditation coach, if you will. He teaches people how to meditate and how to heal themselves and do all sorts of fun, magical things. So I was at a retreat of his in Cancun, Mexico. And before I went to this retreat, I had already practiced his way of meditating. And so I knew vibrationally I would be like very in tune with whatever energy was there. And his meditations are so intense that my body was literally shaking the whole time I'm doing this meditation. And it was just like this profound moment of, it was basically before we went into
Heal other people, which kind of also sounds crazy. So we're going to put that aside for a second. But
my whole body is like just vibrating with like divine loving energy. That's the best way I can describe it. And it's like I had this moment where I could touch God and I could touch light and I could just feel this sense of like divinity. That's the best way I can just describe it. And what I realized from that is all of us are simply a channel. We are simply a channel of information. We're simply a channel of whatever energy we are filling our cup with. And so for me, filling my cup up with loving energy, with grateful energy, with abundant energy, like whatever I want to define my day as, that is the most important thing that I can be doing each and every day to expand my ability to help others, right? To influence. And so I've held that for the last year and really told myself every day, like, how can I be the channel today? Meaning like anything that flows through me is a channel of experience. And so how can I really channel that to be loving, to be kind, to be in gratitude, right? Like of the highest resourcefulness. And it's just profoundly made an impact in everyone that I've come into contact with. And so
that was like a big one. I have more, but like that's probably like one of the biggest ones that's really stuck with me.
Oh my gosh, that sounds incredible. That sounds like something from a dream, an absolute moment of euphoria.
Yes.
Absolutely. I wasn't going to ask you another question, but actually, I have another question on the back of that, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
Yeah.
But I wondered, do you believe in an afterlife?
So I've come to some different conclusions on this.
I grew up as a Christian, so very religious, Christian school, Christian background, all this. And in all of my travels and learnings and realizing how many cultures have religion that is very similar, like Buddhism, like in each country, all of the different religions, like there's such a common theme that I've noticed. And I'm like, okay. If all religions have this common theme of afterlife and beginnings and ends, it's like at the end of the day, everything is energy scientifically anyways. So do I believe in an afterlife? Like there's nuance to that. Do I believe that like I will die and become like a frog or something else?
You know, I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but do I believe that my energy transforms into something else? Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like on an energetic conversation level, yes, when we pass from this life, our energy goes into the field and becomes and transforms into something else. What that something else is, I don't know.
That's a good answer. I remember learning in physics in school that energy cannot be created, it cannot be stored. It simply just changes from one, I guess, energy form to another. So I think, yeah, I can get with you on that. I probably would say similar. Thank you very much. Are there any last words that you'd like to share with our listeners before we finish up?
I think the biggest one is just play more. Play in life, have fun, make it enjoyable, make it an experience, because your life is simply made up of moments. And that's what life is.
It's all one big memory.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on here, getting to know you, learning more about your techniques and tools and the way that you perceive life. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Raechelle.
Thank you so much.
If you like this episode, please make sure you follow along on Spotify and hit that notification bell so that you are notified every time a new episode comes out. Season 2 is imminent and I'm very excited to be sharing with you this new content. Also, don't forget to share with your friends and family if this resonated with you. I'm very excited to spread the word about Destination Happiness. So follow along and I will see you in the next episode.